In the spring of 2020, United Airlines was bleeding money. Planes were grounded, terminals were empty, and the company was burning through cash at a rate that made headlines every single week. So naturally, they went looking for a loan. $5 billion to keep the lights on until people started flying again. Now, when you take out a loan that size, banks want collateral. They want something valuable enough that if you default, they can take it and recover their money. United had planes, of course. They had gates, routes, and real estate. But instead of offering any of that, they put up something that most passengers had never thought twice about: their frequent flyer program, Mileage Plus. And here's where it gets interesting. When the bank ran the numbers on Mileage Plus, they valued it at $21.9 billion. At that exact moment, United Airlines itself, the entire company, planes and all, was worth about $10 billion on the stock market, which means the Miles program was worth more than twice the airline that created it. Delta's loyalty program was valued at $26 billion, while Delta's market cap sat at $20. American's program came in somewhere between $19 and $31 billion, while American, the airline, was valued at just $6. So the question is, how did something that started as a free flight reward for frequent travelers turn into an asset worth more than the company it belongs to? That's exactly what we're going to unpack. To understand how we got here, you need to go back to 1978, when the US government deregulated the airline industry. Before that, fares and routes were heavily controlled. Airlines basically competed on service, not price. Deregulation changed everything overnight. Suddenly, smaller carriers could swoop in, offer cheaper tickets, and start chipping away at the customer base that the big legacy airlines had spent decades building. American Airlines was feeling that pressure as much as anyone. They couldn't just slash prices without destroying their margins, and they couldn't out-advertise their way back to dominance. What they needed was a reason for passengers to keep choosing American, even when a competitor offered a slightly lower fare. The answer, it turned out, was inspired by something completely mundane: trading stamps. You know, the kind you'd collect at a grocery store and eventually exchange for a toaster or a camera. The logic was simple: give people something to accumulate, and they'll keep coming back to accumulate more. So American put together a small team, brought in an outside consultant named Hal Brierly, and spent over a year quietly building what would become the world's first major frequent flyer program. On May 1st, 1981, they launched AAdvantage. The initial idea was straightforward: fly with us, earn miles, eventually get a free flight. They expected maybe 500,000 people to sign up in the first year. They got 1 million. United launched a competing program within a week. By September of that same year, nearly every major airline had followed suit. But here's the detail that accidentally changed the entire industry. United launched their program without a time limit on the miles. American had originally built in a 1-year expiration, thinking of it as a limited promotion. Once United went open-ended, American had no choice but to remove the limit too. And that small decision, removing an expiration date, transformed a short-term marketing promotion into a permanent, ever-growing liability that airlines would eventually turn into their most valuable asset. For the first couple of years, the programs were exactly what they looked like: a way to reward loyal flyers with free flights. But in 1982, American did something that seems unremarkable on the surface but was actually the moment everything changed. They partnered with Hertz and Holland America, allowing members to earn miles when renting a car or booking a cruise. The idea of earning points with partners wasn't new. What was new was the financial mechanics running underneath it. American wasn't going to hand out miles for free every time someone rented a Hertz car. So for the first time, they put a real monetary price on their imaginary points. Hertz would pay American roughly 1 cent per mile, and American would credit those miles to the customer's account. On the surface, a simple arrangement. But when you run the math, the implications are enormous. If a customer accumulated 25,000 miles and redeemed them for a domestic flight, and American had been paid 1 cent per mile by partners along the way, that's $250 in revenue for a seat that cost maybe $15 in variable costs: fuel, food, a bit of overhead. That's a margin that most businesses would consider a fantasy, American noticed. And in 1987, they took it to the next level by partnering with Citibank on a co-branded credit card. Now miles could be earned on every single purchase: groceries, gas, dinner, anything. The program was no longer just a tool to make frequent flyers more loyal. It had quietly become a business in its own right. Let's talk about what this looks like in practice today, because the scale of it is genuinely staggering. The average airline makes about $13 in net profit per passenger. $13. After fuel, labor, maintenance, airport fees, and everything else that goes into actually flying a plane full of people from one city to another, that's what's left. It's a brutally thin margin for what is, by any measure, an incredibly complex operation. Now compare that to what American Airlines brought in from its credit card partnerships and loyalty program in 2023, $5.2 billion. Delta pulled in $6.6 billion from the same source. These aren't small line items tucked into a financial report. In many quarters, the loyalty program is the only reason the airline turns a profit at all. In 2018, before the pandemic, American Airlines actually lost about half a cent for every mile it flew each seat. The flying operation, taken on its own, was underwater. What kept the company profitable that year was $4.2 billion in frequent flyer revenue. So when you hear someone say that airlines are basically banks that happen to fly planes, they're not being glib. They're describing the actual financial architecture of the business. Here's a thought worth sitting with for a moment. Miles are a currency, not metaphorically. They function exactly like currency. You earn them, you store them, you spend them on things of real-world value. There are hundreds of billions of them outstanding at any given time, and their total notional value runs into the tens of billions of dollars. But unlike every other major currency on Earth, miles have no central bank, no regulatory body, and no external check on how they're issued or what they're worth. The airline controls all of it: how many miles exist, what a mile is worth, what you can buy with it, and how quickly the rules can change. Most central banks would consider that level of control to be extraordinary. For airlines, it's just Tuesday, and they use that control. What cost 25,000 miles for a domestic flight in 2015 might cost 50,000 or 75,000 today. Airlines call these adjustments program updates. Frequent travelers call them devaluations. Either way, they happen without warning, without compensation, and without any obligation to grandfather in the miles you've already earned. In 2024, the U.S. Department of Transportation opened a formal investigation into the 4 largest airline loyalty programs, citing concerns that they may be unfair, deceptive, or anti-competitive. The airlines, through their trade group, responded that loyalty programs are simply a way to compete for customers. Whether regulators will push further remains to be seen. What's already clear is that the system is designed so that the airline almost cannot lose on the financial side. On the earning end, they shifted from rewarding miles flown to rewarding dollars spent, which closed off the old exploit where someone could fly a cheap long-distance itinerary and rack up more miles than their ticket was worth. On the redemption end, they moved to dynamic pricing, so the number of miles needed for a flight now rises in lockstep with cash demand. If a flight gets expensive in dollars, it gets expensive in miles too. The arbitrage window that once existed has been sealed shut from both directions. Of course, none of this works unless people actually believe in the miles. And the psychological machinery behind that belief is worth understanding because it's more sophisticated than it might look. Think about the sunk cost effect. You've accumulated 40,000 miles with American. There's a United flight that's cheaper and more convenient, but it won't get you any closer to your next redemption. So you book American anyway, even though by any rational measure, it's the worst choice. You're not flying toward a destination. You're flying to protect something you've already invested in, even though that investment only exists as a number in a database that American controls entirely. Then there's status. Gold, Platinum, Executive Platinum. These tiers weren't designed to reward loyalty. They were designed to manufacture it. The more you fly to maintain a status level, the more you fly beyond what you actually need to fly. Airlines have essentially created a social hierarchy inside their own product, and a remarkable number of people organize significant parts of their travel lives around staying inside it. And then there's the almost enough effect, the permanent state of being just a few thousand miles away from something useful. Research from McKinsey found that loyalty programs' ability to actually change flyer behavior has been declining steadily since 2017. Airlines know this. It's part of why they're aggressively expanding the ways you can earn and spend miles, pushing further into hotels, retail, dining, and entertainment. The goal is to keep the miles feeling relevant even as the original aviation connection fades. There's a certain irony in how all of this came together. Airlines didn't set out to build a financial services company. They set out to fill seats. The loyalty program was a marketing tool, then a retention tool, then a revenue stream, and then, almost by accident, the most valuable thing the company owned. During COVID, when the actual airline was worthless, the miles program kept running. Banks kept buying miles, cardholders kept swiping, and the revenue kept flowing even though the planes were sitting on the tarmac. When America needed $10 billion in emergency financing, they didn't put up their Boeing 777s as collateral. They put up AAdvantage. The program, the customer data, the partner contracts, the whole ecosystem. And the banks accepted it, because by that point everyone understood that the miles program was the real business. So the next time you swipe a card to earn miles on your morning coffee, it's worth knowing what's actually happening. You're not collecting a reward from an airline. You're participating in a financial system where the bank pays the airline for your attention, the airline sells you an asset it can revalue at any time, and you, somewhere in the middle, are both the customer and the product. The free flight at the end feels like a gift. But someone, somewhere, has already been paid for it. It just wasn't you. And that's the real business model. Not flying you anywhere, but making sure you never stop thinking about miles. If you found that interesting, there's a lot more where that came from. Subscribe to the channel, because every week we pull back the curtain on how money actually moves behind the scenes.